G'day, Craig here. Just want to speak a little bit about my guest for episode 2 for a day on the water with. This guy has been fishing ABT tournaments since the inception, way back before 2000. He's won an ABT electric grand final, finished second in the same event, has more podiums than Winner Poker Stick at. Just an absolute legend. Strap yourselves in as we go and spend a day in the water with Jesper Neusen. So today we've been at Maroon, and I'd like you to just now run us through the gear you've run today, which obviously is stuff you do use in your tournament fishing as well.
Yeah, so I don't run overly expensive gear, budgetary wise, more than anything over the years. So look, I do quite well. I run mainly Daiwa, all my reels. I am a fan of them, and I just run little $150 reels, I suppose, a little 1500s for my spin, and my rods are sort of around that 150, 200 mark most of the time, and most of them are around. I like a 6'6" plus on all my gear. Don't like running short rods. Run the 7 foot for plastics. I run 6'6" on bait casters. So this is what we sort of ran today. So some Daiwa, just some Type R. This one's actually a Lucky Craft. It's probably one of my most expensive rods I own, and I've won over the years some G Loomis and stuff, so that's obviously helped out over the years. So this G Loomis here was actually out of a Bass Pro, I think back in the 2000 and mid to early 2000s, I think. So I've had that for quite a long time. I always run 10-pound Power Pro. I'm a big fan of that. I used to run Pen. I run it on all my bait casters and spin, just 10-pound across the whole board. The braid runs fine on spin and that. Then my leaders, if I'm running plastics, and that depends on the lake. If I'm running timber, I'll do sort of 10 to 14 pound. Spinnerbaits, jackals are 14 pound. At the moment I'm using Sunline. I used to use Nikon, I think it used to be called. And when I run plastics and around weed beds and stuff, I'll go down to about 10 pound, and that's it. I don't find I need to go any lighter. I still always seem to get the bites and catch the fish, so I think why risk losing the lure or losing the fish over a couple of pound of line.
Which I can attest to this morning after losing my favourite spinnerbait on 6 pound. One outfit to catch fish. What are you going to tell on the run?
If I'm running summer, warmer months, look, I just throw on a spinnerbait. That's my go-to all the time. Natural sort of colours, greens, a bit olive, whatever, AUs, that kind of thing. Generally ½ ounce, that kind of stuff. So,
show us the one we're using today up close.
Yeah, so this one here I modify though. I do change the skirt. I like this colour, which is a green pumpkin with a blue silver sort of fleck in it, and I always run a combo of gold and silver. That's just my go-to.
But that's not necessary, is it? Like realistically, no. I know for myself, I was using spinnerbaits this morning, catching fish on spinnerbaits straight out of the packet, exactly. No modification.
Yeah, I think for me that's just confidence. I've always caught fish on them in the clearer water, and so like any lure, once you get confident on it and it's a go-to, that's what I tie on. But I will adapt to the changes if the water's dirty or whatever, like yourself this morning. You were catching them on a different colour. But spinnerbait obviously was the bite that was today. If I come into winter, into the cooler months, 100% just straight plastic. I go a slider, that's my preference, because obviously I fish them. And as the water really cools down, when it gets about under 16 degrees, I'll go 1/4 ounce and go really shallow.
Okay, Jesper, so thanks for your time. Now I'm going to take you back where I like to start, and that is your earliest memories around fishing and when it sort of became, I guess, important to you.
Yeah, so I was probably quite young. I remember probably as young as 5 or 6 getting a beach rod for for Christmas, I think it was, and yeah, fishing a lot of Fraser Island and Rainbow Beach kind of things with the family on the school holidays. So yeah, that's probably my earliest memories that I've got as a kid. And then, as I got into my early teens, we used to do a lot of creek fishing around Scrubby Creek and all that sort of stuff around sort of Browns Plains was sort of where I grew up, and just catching eeltail catfish and eels and that sort of stuff, so
So that real sort of bread and butter as a kid, walking streams type stuff.
Yeah, going and collecting the freshwater mussels and using them for bait, or digging up worms from the bank and that sort of stuff. And we sort of did that probably right up until about the 90s, and then sort of progressed then to heading out to sort of Wivenhoe and taking worms and a bit of prawn and catching spangles and lungfish and those sorts of things back in those days. And that sort of was the ground or the foundation to what I sort of did as a fisher person. I obviously went down to Jacob's Well, those sort of things. I used to have a motorbike and I had a rod holder on that as well. I used to take that and ride down to Jakey's and fish off the jetty many a times and stuff like that.
So obviously got a fairly strong background in that sort of freshwater environment and fishing and that kind of thing. So when did it start to evolve? When was it that you became interested in tournaments, and what sort of sparked that?
Yeah, look, I had a mate whose old man was in the Australian Bass Association in the early 90s, around mid 90s, and they were stocking Clary Hall and Hinds Dam before Hinds Dam opened, and so that sort of got the interest into the bass side. They used to go up to Noosa River a little bit as well. I used to talk about that. So back in those days, my mate, he had a canoe, and we used to go out and into Wivenhoe trolling and started chasing bass. And I suppose that was my introduction into the bass side.
So we'll fast forward a little bit and hit sort of late 90s into the 2000s and the formation of Australian bream tournaments. So obviously Steve Morgan stood that up. How'd you get involved in that, and tell us a little bit about your journey into the entry level of tournament fishing?
So I suppose it came probably from the ABA, and they sort of ran some local classics and stuff, and I think that sort of sparked the interest into tournaments, and then just started getting into a lot more lure fishing, cast and retrieving and things like that. And then I sort of got, heard the word around the ABT starting, and decided to go to a tournament in 2000 here in Maroon, and it was my sort of first tournament experience. So, and like in that one day, I learnt probably more than I learnt in the last, 5 years plus, or probably my whole life in regards to catching the fish, and those techniques.
We were talking earlier about that experience, and one of the things that stood out was obviously ABT, the motto is who shares wins, right? Tell us about that tournament. You were struggling. What happened that changed day?
So basically I hadn't caught a fish all day. It was getting towards the end of the tournament. I was fishing near the wall, and Harry Watson came up next to me and asked how I was going and chucking a few lures, and said I was a bit struggling, I hadn't caught a fish, and he was asking what I was chucking. I said a slider, and he said, mate, just do it like this, and he gave me a bit of a pep, a bit of a show, cast, hopping and stuff, and he said, see how you go with that. And then as he was leaving, I chucked out and did exactly what he said, and nailed my first fish, and I was like, oh, okay, this is really cool. And then got a second one. There was no big weights. They weren't big to weigh anything in regards to getting a place, but really appreciated the help, and went up to him after the tournament and thanked him for his advice, and it was sort of the start of that journey of these guys, start to look at these guys as a inspiration to sort of keep going.
Who would be the major influence in your tournament / fishing journey lifetime?
Look, that's a hard question. I don't really have one particular person that I could say hand on heart that was that guy, or was the one that really got me going. But look, I think that in the early days, John Schofield and Jason Ehrlich, Gavin Dunn, Harry Watson, Craig Simmons, Tim Morgan, these guys, and there's probably a few more, these guys were the guys that were always leading the pack, always the ones that were catching the fish, and the ones that were bringing out the techniques as well, and pushing the limits. And so every tournament I did, I just basically took what they did. I remember Jason Early taking out a tournament, I think it was in BP, possibly Boonah, on a smoke yellow core slider, and that's sort of when they first, I think, started coming out. And then all of a sudden I'm buying, smoke yellow core sliders and replicating that and catching fish. So these guys that really at the start of the ABT and set those groundworks really pushed the limits, and I think for me that's probably where I would probably take most of my inspiration from.
So do you have a favorite technique, or has that changed as the fishing has evolved? Obviously, back in the day it may have just been primarily spinnerbaits and plastics. So has that changed, or what have you seen as the major changes in the tournament scene?
I think me personally, I mean, I actually fish a lot of old school lures still, and I actually start to find it very hard to purchase those lures today as technology and I suppose new stuff comes out on the market. Tackle shops need to keep with the times, which is really great, and they bring stuff out and guys come and buy that and they catch fish. But I still catch fish on an old Hot Lips crankbait even today. I catch them on slider lures, plastics, and there's a lot of great stuff on the market. But for me, there are, I suppose, spinnerbaits. I didn't catch fish on spinnerbaits for many years at the start. I didn't know how to really fish them, and it wasn't until I sort of had a couple of good sessions and I started getting my head around how to use them. Now it's a tie on lure every time I go, like today, we've been catching all day on spinnerbaits. So but I think for me, it's really just about the old school stuff, and I really do like that stuff. And some of the lures now I buy off eBay, and they're in the vintage section. So and they become expensive because obviously they become vintage, and then you're a bit scared to throw them. But I like still that sort of stuff. But I do dabble in some new stuff and try them out, and I do buy those lures and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty good.
So your main focus in your career has been in the bass electric space. Now, as with all tournament fishing, and whether it be bass, brim, whatever it is, there's been massive evolution in technology and how we fish and that kind of thing. So same thing in the bass electric. Tell us a little bit about what it was like in those early days to what has evolved, and how that actually helped you and in achieving your results, because you won the 2008 Bass Electric Grand Final on Boonah Dam, which is a fantastic result, and backed it up with a second a couple of years later. So tell us about that evolution of the boats and the technology.
Yeah, so I think in the early days, we used to run either just a bow mount and then put a keel on the back to stop us from, wattling the bums down the lake, and then some guys started running like two motors front and back.
All right, we're going to take Carl Jochimson out of this list. Who's the greatest of all time?
Hard question to answer, mate. But if I had to pick one guy out of everyone that really, I suppose, helped me fishing wise, and always happy to have a chat and all that sort of stuff, I'd have to say John Schofield. He was probably the man, taking time out in the tackle shop to talk to me for an hour about fly fishing and showing me stuff and that sort of thing, and then on the water. And so I think in those days, I think he was probably the man, and he was very well loved in the tournament scene. He was a nice guy. He was always approachable and always happy to stand there and have a chat with you if you asked him a question. So
could fish a little bit too, couldn't Jesper? Thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. I'm not sure where this is all going to go, but having people like yourself, extremely well credentialed anglers, know their stuff, hopefully will help this grow into something that's pretty cool. So thank you for your time, your expertise. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and no, thank you for inviting me out today and being a part of this journey with yourself. And I've always been a bit quite humble and just sort of to myself in regards to what I've done throughout all my career. So I can appreciate that you've taken an interest in myself and what I've done, and putting that out there for people to see that I've achieved over all the years of doing angling. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And I reckon that you're more than one part. I reckon you've got one part out of today, and I reckon we'll bring you back. We talked about the Everglades up at Noosa. I reckon that'll be pretty specky.
Do that one.
So, folks, you haven't seen the last of this bloke, I reckon. Thanks, Jesper.
Yeah, thank
Cheers.
you. Cheers.